Thank you, Ben, for that kind introduction and for your leadership. You know, as ADL CEO, I find myself on TV now and then. And the other day, I was on a morning news show, and the host turned to me and said, "Jonathan, I looked at your Twitter feed, and I was stunned by the amount of ugly anti-Semitism directed at you." And I replied, "Welcome to my world." But it's no longer my world. More and more, it's our world. Because you see, something has changed. Something definitely has changed. We have political candidates who disparage their opponents as elitists or globalists or as different than regular Americans. We have entertainers with messiah complexes spewing anti-Jewish hate, obscenely comparing themselves to real-world martyrs. We have trending movies on our major streaming platforms that are little more than the kind of propaganda that Goebbels would lovingly approve. And this isn't happening in a normal environment. Anti-Semitism is indisputably on the rise. ADL tracked a 34% increase in anti-Jewish acts in 2021. That was the highest number we've ever seen in more than 40 years of doing this work. We're recording acts of harassment, vandalism, and violence every single day in Brooklyn, but also increasingly in non-Jewish neighborhoods in New York City and across the country. And of course, it's happening online in ways you can't even imagine. This past week was Election Day. ADL was monitoring more than 100 extremists, right-wing extremists, who ran for office this cycle, including a number who proudly, openly identified as Christian nationalists, but who, of course, say they love the Jewish state. We also have hardened anti-Zionists currently sitting in the House of Representatives, but who, of course, insist they love the Jewish people. Let me be clear. Both of these camps have exclusionary worldviews, and many of you are the people who they seek, not just to exclude, but to intimidate, to marginalize, and harm. Look, I could spend the rest of the day detailing just the anti-Semitic incidents that ADL has tracked at college campuses from coast to coast, from small liberal arts schools to huge public universities, simply over the past few months. But it didn't just start this past month or this past year. In 2017, we watched men march in Charlottesville, and ADL sounded the alarm. In 2018, we mourned in Pittsburgh and hoped for change. In 2019, we paid respects in Poway, in Jersey City, in Muncie, and called for action. And in 2020, we marched in Brooklyn and cried for attention. And in 2021, we witnessed attacks in broad daylight across America, and we pleaded for help. But today, the time of cries and pleas, it's over. That moment has passed. Because you see, this is no longer a situation of concern. This is a state of emergency. Anti-Semitic acts literally have tripled in the past 6 years, and unfortunately, I see no reason to believe that number might not triple again over the next 6. And this isn't just about the Jews. It is increasingly clear to me, and I think many others, that anti-Semitism is not just the oldest hatred. It's not just the most vile conspiracy theory. Anti-Semitism is a caustic agent that corrodes democracies. It's a sign of societal decay. And so, indeed, while it threatens Jews in the most literal sense, it endangers our nation, and it threatens all places where it takes root. But I know you know this. That's why you're here at Never Is Now. But I know you're also here because you want to understand, so what are we going to do about it? How can we be safe? Safe in our synagogues, safe on our campuses, safe in our very homes. How can we lead fully Jewish lives without feeling scared? Unfortunately, this is the question of our time. And frankly, it's the sole reason ADL was created. And in this moment, faced with this state of emergency, ADL will rise to the challenge and deliver on our core purpose, protecting the Jewish people. And if you're watching, sitting here at the Javits Center or watching at home on the live stream, whether or not you're Jewish, let me be clear. This is not just about saving the Jewish community. Ultimately, it's about saving our country. So how will we do it? How will we achieve safety? I'll make the case today that we are going to do it through a mix of security and solidarity. Let me explain what I mean by that. In terms of security, ADL will continue to fight the battle downstream where acts happen, securing our community in the synagogues where our families pray, in the schools where our kids learn, in the homes where our seniors reside, and in the online spaces where our children and so many of us socialize and spend so much of our lives. However, security is not just about making sure that those buildings have strong locks or the best alarms, even though ADL fought for record funding for the federal nonprofit security grant program this past year, and we will continue to do so. Security is also about disrupting anti-Semitism and violence before it ever reaches our doors. It's about taking risks to get to where the threat is heading. You see, I believe we as a community need to stop responding solely to symptoms. We need to start dealing with the disease itself. To paraphrase Wayne Gretzky, this means that it's time we skate to where the puck is going. And in this case, we need to go upstream. Earlier this week, ADL announced a partnership with BBYO, the world's leading Jewish teen movement. Together, ADL and BBYO will train 70,000 Jewish teens in 700 plus chapters around the country and in 49 other countries across the world. Our goal is to prepare our children before they ever get to the college campus on how to deal with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And I'm so excited about what ADL and BBYO will do together. And the next upstream frontier is engaging businesses, making sure they don't back anti-Semites just to chase a buck. And to illustrate this, let me tell you a story about the ADL, Kanye West, and Adidas. As we all watched in recent weeks, the world-famous Kanye West unleashed torrents of anti-Jewish hate, both online and offline, on social media and in interviews. And as that happened, ADL, we do what we do, we sprang into action. Our researchers tracked how Kanye was cheered by extremists, from the Nation of Islam to the Proud Boys to neo-Nazi leaders. And many brands like Balenciaga and Gap, MRC, creative artists, many others, said that Kanye's values weren't their own. And as he unraveled, they cut ties. In many cases, they took losses of millions of dollars because of those decisions. But Adidas was silent. So I called the chairman of Adidas, and he gave me a list of reasons as to why he couldn't act. Now look, I've worked at some big companies. I get the politics, and I understand the pressure. So I told him, hey, we will work with you, and we will praise you if and when you do the right thing. But until you do, ADL will hammer you as hard as we can. I hung up the phone, and I knew to get that done wasn't about me or us. We had to turn to all of you. Adidas needed to hear directly from the people who buy their shoes and wear their workout clothes. So ADL launched a campaign, #RunAwayFromHate, to use social media to raise awareness of their inertia. And almost 20,000 of you directly lobbied the company. You posted, you tweeted, you emailed, you clicked, and you helped. First, the media took notice, and stories started to spread about their inaction. Then the markets took notice. Adidas' stock price dropped 23% over the month. And then Adidas took notice. Instead of just keeping their relationship with Kanye West under review, they put it on ice and terminated it. And look, while I wish they had done it sooner, Adidas, to their credit, made it abundantly clear that they would not do business with bigots. And today I am so pleased that they're here at Never Is Now to announce an incredible commitment that demonstrates their dedication to fighting anti-Semitism, to addressing hate, will last long beyond this moment. And if you haven't noticed, I am styling some very nice new sambas that I bought last night. Adidas made a meaningful step forward at a time when it really matters. But the threats are morphing. They're taking new forms. And we've got to adapt and innovate to meet them. Now, for several decades, there's been a growing movement for public companies to adopt environmental, social, and good governance practices, often known by the shorthand ESG. So what does that mean? It means that companies adopt these so-called ESG policies and steer some of their investments toward a social good, and theoretically avoid investments in companies that do bad things, say that pollute the environment or abuse their workers. Look, I know this field well. Before ESG was fashionable, 2 decades ago, I co-founded Ethos Brands, and we created Ethos Water, a premium bottled water that used a portion of its profits to fund programs that brought clean water to children in need around the world. It worked. Ethos donated millions, and to date, scores of millions of dollars over the years. First as an independent company, now today as a brand wholly owned by Starbucks. And I learned firsthand as an entrepreneur and an executive at Starbucks that you can do well and do good. You can generate financial returns and create social impact, which is the basic contract, if you will, that propels ESG. At the same time, there are some who disagree with ESG. I have friends who tell me that the only purpose of the corporation is to maximize profits for its shareholders. And look, while there are interesting, academic arguments for that position, and people are welcome to disagree, here is something upon which we all can agree. ESG should not be a Trojan horse for anti-Semitism. You may have heard about this happening in recent years. Brands like Ben & Jerry's, who knew when they announced that they would not sell ice cream in the West Bank, it effectively would end their presence in all of Israel. Or agencies like Morningstar, adopting policies that would make doing business with the Jewish state a black mark on their ESG ratings. Or corporations like General Mills, which sold its stake in a joint venture that operates a plant in East Jerusalem after a multi-year campaign against them by activists from the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, also known as BDS. In each of these instances, and more, many more, ADL has been there, sometimes out in front, often behind the scenes, trying to persuade these firms to reverse course. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And look, if it were just a few of these companies, an occasional outlier, you might say, it's not a major issue. Ultimately, though, I believe this is just the tip of the iceberg of what could be a much bigger wave. You see, these BDS activists are trying to hijack the ESG movement. And institutional investors, knowingly or unknowingly, have incorporated this anti-Israel bias into many of their ESG policies. These policies, they target the Jewish state, and to respond to them, we need to call them what they are: anti-Jewish hate. And so for ADL to fulfill our mission of leading the fight against anti-Semitism, we need an upstream strategy to meet the emerging challenge of anti-Israel bias in the corporate world. That's why I am so pleased to announce this morning that ADL is acquiring J-Lens, the leading Jewish values-based investor network in the world. J-Lens is a nonprofit organization with a strong track record in promoting social responsible investing and doing so with Jewish values. Since 2012, Julie Hammerman, the founder and entrepreneur behind J-Lens, and her team, they've been blazing a trail, getting a seat at the table in the shareholder advocacy space. They've been a critical player in preventing anti-Israel forces from taking hold. And now that J-Lens is coming under the ADL umbrella, we will scale up this effort considerably. And so this is the next step in our efforts to go upstream and to stop anti-Semitism, because ADL is the only organization with the expertise, the relationships, as Juju said, the convening power to take this work to scale for maximum impact. And as we go deep on BDS in the boardroom, as a strategy to ensure our security, we must also go wide and bring in allies from within the Jewish community and from far beyond it to join us in this work. Look, since the founding of ADL, we've been deliberate in building bridges, in finding new allies to stop hate and intolerance, because we have always recognized that for Jews to be safe, everyone must be safe. When one community is attacked, that threatens all of us. And that's why security is critical, but solidarity is the other pillar of our work during these perilous times. Our new Embed program within the ADL Center on Extremism invites representatives of other community advocacy groups, such as the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, or GLAAD, and the Asian American Foundation, to place personnel inside ADL, inside our center, by sitting shoulder to shoulder with our experts. Other organizations can gain actionable information. We can train them, we can support them, all the while ADL benefits from the unique perspectives and skill sets of these groups. In partnership with our friends from the National Urban League, we recently launched the Community Solidarity and Safety Coalition. I know it's a mouthful, but our goal is to share what we've learned about securing our sacred spaces in the Jewish community with others. After all, there is a lot that a Baptist church or an HBCU or a Sikh Gurdwara or a Hindu temple or a Baha'i center or a Chinese community center can learn from our experience. And we at ADL will do everything in our power to help them. And finally, ADL and the U.S. Conference of Mayors recently organized more than 150 mayors, Democrats and Republicans, and relaunched our Mayor's Compact Against Hate, committing local leaders to stand against bigotry and extremism in all forms. And my hope is that we will expand this group 20x in the years ahead, and we're going to need all of your help to do that. Because you see, whether it's working with mayors, other ethnic and religious communities, sharing what we know, this is real solidarity that enhances and expands our safety and truly creates security for all of us. Now, despite all of this activity and achievement, I think it's fair for those of you sitting in the audience, or again, watching on the live stream, to ask, so what can I do? Or what can we do? So let me conclude by sharing some thoughts. First, what you can do, speak out on your own. Those of us who want to take on this fight have the power, I might even say the obligation, to call out hate whenever it happens. Not to wait, but to speak out with moral clarity and be objective and consistent about it. Now that might mean, in all honesty, you might face some awkward moments when you have to call out coworkers or challenge friends or push back on your own partisan allies. I get that that's not easy, but remember, no matter what anyone tells you, there is no right or left in this fight. There's only right and wrong. Second, join ADL's advocacy efforts. There are so many ways to get involved with advocacy. You can do it through one of our 25 regional offices or through our Glass Leadership Institute. We also have ways you can advocate and engage online from the convenience of your laptop or from the palm of your hand with a phone. And as we saw with Adidas, it can make a huge difference. Third, and maybe most important, what can you do? Don't lose hope. We can cultivate hope in so many ways. If you're a Jewish parent, give your children the gift of a Jewish education so they have pride in their people and the knowledge and inner strength to face down the haters. Let me tell you, self-defense starts with self-awareness and self-love. If you're a student, learn about the legacy of those who came before us who inarguably encountered much more difficult obstacles than the ones we face, and who bravely and courageously and ferociously overcame them. And if you're non-Jewish, be prepared to assert yourself as an ally, because our struggle is your struggle. It's America's struggle. And so in the end, to push back against these forces of hate, I believe with every fiber in my being that we need unity inside our multi-ethnic, multi-racial, religiously pluralistic, politically diverse Jewish community, as well as unity with the Jewish people from outside our community, from all segments and sectors of society. That is how we will respond and overcome this state of emergency. That is how we will build security and solidarity. That's how we win. So now, let's get to work. Our next speaker is on the front lines of the fight against violent extremism. On an almost weekly basis, our team at the ADL Center on Extremism is in touch with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, sharing information and helping the brave, patriotic men and women of the FBI disrupt violence before it happens. And leading the Bureau, we are blessed to have a director who has demonstrated, against considerable pressure, his independence, his integrity, and his fidelity to the rule of law during these incredibly trying times. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you today our friend, our ally, and our partner, the Director of the FBI, Christopher Wray.